Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach, Maranatha. Welcome to the Septuagint versus the Masoretic channel, the only ministry of its kind that looks at the truth of the scriptures, comparing the Septuagint and the Masoretic text translations to see if there's any differences and whether they are worth our time. So today we're looking at Joshua chapter 2. There are 24 verses. Beginning in verse 1, we have an omission of the word young. So these are not just any men, they are specifically young men. In verse 3, we have another omission talking about what time of the day this was, which is this night. The men that entered into your house this night. In verse 4, we have a jaw-dropping difference. And the reason I say this is because, let me just read it for you in the Masoretic first. And the woman took the two men, the two Israelite spies, and hid them and said thus to the Jericho officials, "There came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were." So basically she's saying, yes, two men came to where I am living. So they were physically there with me in my house, but I did not know from where they came. So that's, just remember that information. In the Septuagint, it reads like this: "And the woman, Rahab, took the two men and hid them, and she spoke to the messengers of the Jericho officials, saying, the men came into me." I believe she's implying that they had sexual intercourse with me. Let me just specify what kind of intercourse that is, because there are different types of intercourse, such as verbal intercourse, which is a discourse essentially. And she did not deny where they came from. She knew where they were from. Whereas in the Masoretic, she seems to play the fool. She is giving the impression that she is ignorant of who these men are and where they are from. Where in the Septuagint, by contrast, she knows where they come from. She does not deny. She knows of the situation, who they are, where they come from. So she isn't playing the fool. She's being factual. She's relaying a story that is believable, since she is a prostitute / harlot. She's saying these men came into me specifically, which is what is probably expected in that day and age. What else would they be doing there? She's not a Airbnb or a hotel. She's not a nurse or some kind of like a masseuse or something. There's an addition here, as I've mentioned, but I did not know where they came from, whence they were. So she does know where they are from, Israel. Verse 5, it says, "If you may overtake them," versus "you shall overtake them." So in the Septuagint, there is a possibility. She's saying you may overtake them, you may not, but at least try. But in the Masoretic, she's very sure you will overtake them. Just hurry up, you'll find them. Verse 9, an addition of, "and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you." Verse 11, we were amazed in our heart, and there was no longer any spirit in any of us. This is Rahab speaking to the spies. Because of you. Verses, "our hearts did melt, neither did there remain any more courage in any man." So we can see a bit of a contrast there. It's not so much that they didn't have courage, but there wasn't any spirit in any of them. And that's not spirit, like technically there's no more spirit. They're saying, yeah, I think it does relate to courage. It does relate to their being brave. Our hearts did melt. versus we were amazed in our heart. So it's not that their hearts melted literally or there was some emotional an emotional expression where if your heart's melting within you, it's more like it could be heartbreak, could be a disastrous thing. Usually it's a negative connotation. Here in the Septuagint, it says they were amazed, or we were amazed in our heart. When you're amazed in your heart, you can't believe it's true. It's almost too good to be true, or it's just bewilders you. That's verse 11. Verse 12, this is Rahab talking to the spies. Deal mercifully with the house of my father versus show kindness. So she knows her life is on the line. They could very well just include her among the peoples who are to be executed in the city of Jericho. We have an addition of give me a true token. Give me a true token. Whatever that means, it has been added on to the original text. Verse 13, and you shall rescue my soul from death. So it sounds like she's commanding them, do this. Did not even say please. She's saying, you shall rescue my soul from death. Although I think the tone is she is humbling herself before them. On the other hand, the Masoretic renders it this way, and deliver our lives from death. So I wrote here in the Septuagint, don't forget me as well. Don't forget me, because she's talking about rescuing her family, her extended family, and then rescue my soul, which seems to imply don't forget me as well. I'm part of that, just in case, just to make sure. Versus deliver our lives from death, which is referring to everybody she just listed here, which seems to be a redundancy. Verse 14, addition of if you utter not this our business. So the men in the Masoretic are saying, if you utter not this our business, we will save you. So don't tell anybody about what we spoke of. Significant difference in the same verse. And she said, when Yah shall have delivered the city to you, versus you shall deal. Oh, hold on a sec. When Yah shall have delivered the city to you, you shall deal mercifully and truly with me. So that's her condition, her parameters there. Versus, and the men said, so this is, the contrast is she's speaking in the Septuagint, in the Masoretic, it's the men speaking these words, and it shall be when Yah has given us the land that we will deal kindly and truly with you. So it seems they're setting the parameters, they're setting the conditions. That is not what is happening. It's actually Rahab, again, building on what she just said in the previous verse, save my family life, save me alive. And then the men agreed, our life for yours, even to death. And then she replied to them, okay, well, when Yah has delivered the city to you, you shall deal mercifully and truly with me. It makes sense. She's just trying to reiterate, reinforce this demand, her request. Verse 15, there's an addition of by a cord through the window. So it's not specific in the Septuagint as to how she let them down, but that makes sense. A cord, or perhaps a thick rope. Another addition is for her house was upon the town wall, and she dwelt upon the wall. So I think that perhaps will be mentioned later on in the Septuagint. I did not see that mentioned in that verse. Verse 16, hill country versus mountain. So it's one thing to get to a mountain, which sounds very elevated, versus a hill country, which makes sense. What is a hill country? It could be people living there. It could just be of a lesser elevation, but it is a hill country, perhaps with fields, greenery. Verse 17, we are clear of this oath. We are clear of this your oath. Versus we will be blameless of this your oath. So that is an interesting expression. Are they clear of it? Because when we think of the word clear, we think, okay, I'm clear of this demand. I'm exempt of it. I don't think that's what it means. I believe it means they will be clear. They will not corrupt what she said, but they will fulfill it. They will be pure in this regard. So we are clear. Our consciences are clear, perhaps, is one way to possibly understand it. But we are clear of this. We are clear. This is clear. If someone gives you a command and they ask you, are we clear? And then you say crystal clear. Perhaps that's what they meant. This is clear to us. We understand what you're saying, and we will do it. On the other hand, in the Masoretic, it says, we will be blameless of this your oath, which sounds like we're going to fulfill it as well, and we're going to perform it just as you said. So it can be a little confusing, this wording, unless you try to understand that they are not trying to make an excuse to say we're going to find a way out of it. We're going to be exempt from this. That is not what they are saying. Verse 18, into a part of the city we shall enter, talking about Jericho, the city Jericho specifically, versus when we come into the land, which is vague. It could be multiple places. It does not have to be Jericho. It could be a part of the land that is near Jericho. But no, they're talking about the city, which is Jericho. And we have an omission of you shall set a sign. So visible sign in the Hebrew, I believe it's ot. If you reverse translate, you take the Greek, which is what the Septuagint is written in, then you reverse engineer it back into the original Greek. It would be ot. Verse 19, his guilt shall be upon him. Talking about if any one of your family members that are in your house, if they leave, they exit the door of your house, his guilt shall be upon him, and we shall be quit of this your oath. Because, again, it's not just them who are invading the land, it's going to be the armies of Israel. So they perhaps will not be able to recognize or will not be aware of this agreement, because they're not going to share it with everybody unless they do. So we will find out what happens. And we will be responsible for all that shall be found with you in your house. The Masoretic, his blood shall be upon his head, versus guilt. And we will be guiltless. So we can see that they're omitting that it's related to this oath that they took with her. So that's important that in the Septuagint they remember the oath. That's the context of this statement, that it's within the parameters, this agreement that they had made with her and she with them. Whosoever shall be with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head. If any hand be upon him. So another way of saying we will be responsible, but I just think in the Septuagint to say I'm responsible for all that shall be found with you in your house means they really do care. They're going to ensure the well-being versus that if any hand be upon them. I believe that's referring to specifically physical harm, physical injury. Verse 20, we see a significant difference here. But if anyone should injure us or betray these our matters, we shall be quit of this your oath. So this is an exemption. If we happen to be injured or someone betrays us, if specifically her or maybe one of her family members find out and then they divulge this information to the authorities of Jericho and then they end up being caught or they foil the plan, then we're exempt of this oath of yours. We're not going to keep you safe, basically. Versus if you utter this our business, so that's talking about strictly a verbal breach of trust. So they will either Rahab or her family leaks this out verbally to the officials of Jericho. We will be exempt of this your oath, or acquit, which you made us to swear. So we can see the parameters are somewhat different because they are referring to their bodily health, their physical condition. If they were to be physically harmed, that's one parameter. And then being betrayed is a second very specific condition as well. Whereas if you utter this our business, so let's say she does share this information with her family, and her family are trustworthy. They know that their lives are on the line, so they keep it to themselves. They don't share it with anyone else. So if she shares it with her family, will she still be exempt? It's one thing to share it with people, but it's another thing altogether to be betrayed as a result of sharing the information. So we can see that, it makes more sense in the Septuagint that they're concerned for their safety, and perhaps this might extend to the rest of the armies of Israel, the people, not just the two individuals here who are spying and being betrayed. So those are very, they're more specific, they're more, just it's common sense versus just somebody sharing the information to trustworthy people within her circle of trust, which are specifically her family members and extended family members. So that the Septuagint is allowing her to share it with her family members, that possibility of sharing it with her family members. The Masoretic is somewhat, there's a bit of a possibility she may not be able to share this matter of their business, her agreement between her and the spies. We have in verse 22, roads, the word roads versus the way, all the way. So these are specific roads versus a general direction, which could be different types of landscape. It doesn't have to be roads that you travel on. In verse 24, into our power, they said to Joshua, Yah has delivered all their land into our power. These are the spies talking to him. Versus into our hands, so different wording there. And then it says, all that land, or the inhabitants of that land specifically, tremble because of us, so they're afraid. Versus they faint because of us. So it's a little more dramatic, that terminology. So it's all for this chapter of Joshua. Thank you very much for your time. May God bless you and make your way prosperous. Until next time, we'll look at Joshua chapter 3. So thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach too, if you're keeping the Feast of Tabernacles at this time, according to the sighted moon and the Aviv barley timing, reckoning, and Maranatha.